All the good reasons why you ought to submit proposals to get on a professional conference program, or why you should submit something for publication in a range of different kinds of journals, from pure research to rather informal kinds of approaches to that. So those are all the good reasons. How many of you have submitted journal articles? Now, why is that there's so few? If there's all these good reasons. Because what? Intimidation. Okay, we'll take care of that. Why else? Come on, the real reason. Yes, time, because it's a pain in the neck and you have to do a lot of work beforehand, and you have to, if you're trying to get on to do a presentation at a conference, when do you have to submit that proposal? 6 months in advance. So if you've got something coming up here in November, you've already missed the deadline. And you know, it just kind of beats you down on that. But there's a way to deal with all of this, and that's what we're going to talk about, and a way to ramp things up and feel more comfortable about things, and in fact get some nice pats on the head from your principal, your superintendent, the school board, parents, and even students. And who is it that is your boss mostly? The district. But who do you respond to? No, you don't. You respond to the kids. If the kids don't like what you're doing, you stop doing it. Or you fight and eventually stop doing it. No, it's a dynamic situation, and you have to sort through all of this. I'm Ted Fowler. I came to the university in 1974 in the College of Education, have taught science methods and general methods and curriculum development courses. And prior to that, in Texas, in Massachusetts, in New Jersey, I was a physics teacher and a chemistry teacher, and astronomy and life science. And then also, while I've been here at the university, one of the things that I got involved in, surely by accident, was GE aircraft engines and Merle Dow Pharmaceuticals. They've changed their name about 6 times. Called up the college and said, you know, we need some help with our training programs. We do after-hours training out here in our business, in our industry, and we want to improve the quality of training. So got involved in, made these engineers out at GE go through workshops and a little student teaching and be observed as they were delivering their courses. And from that got involved with the College of Engineering, working with engineering faculty to optimize instruction and optimize impact through instruction. I've also worked for Centers for Disease Control, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which is not OSHA, and to prepare training materials, and particularly around training, around safety and improving the safety of new workers and young workers. New workers and young workers, those are the ones that get maimed and killed most frequently because of bravado or because of, I don't know what they're doing, and they can't recognize dangerous situations even if they trip over it or fall off of it. So then Anant and I and others have been working together for years through the research experience for teachers, and then the CEEMS program. And it's all a lot of fun, and I still enjoy teaching. I live on a farm over in Indiana. I'm retired, but then because of grants have decided to continue to work full time, much to my wife's upset, and trying to maintain tractors and watershed projects and things like that. Okay, well, let me do some surveys of you. How many of you are science teachers? How many of you are math teachers? How many of you are neither science nor math teachers? And you are a technology teacher? What are you?
Engineering.
Oh, okay. 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 And lo and behold, all of you are engineering teachers now, because that's what you've signed up to do and what you've been working on. Is this your first year in CEEMS or second year? Second. That's what I thought. Okay. Let's see. What else do I need to know? How many of you teach 7th and 8th graders? How many of you teach 9th and 10th graders? How many of you teach 11th and 12th graders? Okay. How many of you teach career exploration in STEM professions? Everybody's hand's up now. Everybody's hand needs to be up now. Okay. One of the other things that we're currently involved with is a large consortium across the tri-state region to try to bring business and industry and schools and the informals. What are the informals? Informal educators. Museum center, zoo, iSpace, and others, some after-school groups. 4-H would be an informal education provider, to try to bring a focus and bring it to parents and to bring it to business and industry, to bring a focus on STEM education, either any of the components, science education, math education, technology education, engineering education, or some way of tying all of that together and making sure that there is that synergy that exists. Making sure that science teachers don't go around and just say, oh, well, you should learn this in math. That's your problem. Or that math teachers don't go around and say, well, yeah, you'll use this sometime like next week, but never have a context for the mathematics that's taught, or that mathematics actually opens a lot of doors, and it's not just mathematics, it's logical thinking, it's mathematical thinking. But then that's what science teachers want students to do also, is that same sort of thing. So if there's any way that things can be tied together in a more integrated approach and in a more realistic approach and in a way which shows that there are not just real life applications, but that this is real life as we go through our studies and see how all of this stuff fits together, which just makes your job that much more difficult. Maybe in the long run, easier. It's if you can only motivate. Man, I can remember my first year teaching, listening to some NPR. I don't even know if NPR existed, but somebody was on the radio, and I took such affront because what this person, it was a he at that time, of course, was saying, well, you know, as a teacher's job is 50% of it is motivation of students, and only 50% is delivery of content. And I thought, well, that is just not my job, motivating students. You know, I am better than that. And man, the number has crept up. Yeah, I went past that 50% time some years back. Now I'm thinking maybe it's 60% or 70 or 80%. I mean, it would be just great if the kids got off the bus and came into your classroom and said, you know, I was looking at the moon this morning. I didn't know the moon came out during the daytime. Why is that? Oh man, job would be easy if that was the way it was. Okay, one thing that I passed out was the science and engineering practices. Have you seen these before? Science and engineering practices, and then mathematics practices. The science and engineering practices it is the thing. If you teach in Ohio, you don't know what I'm talking about, because they're part of the next generation science standards. The science practices, and then lo and behold, engineering practices, it is over the top. This was invented a half a dozen years ago during this process of putting together the next generation science standards. The science curricula in Ohio comes from the same roots, benchmarks in science education, as the next generation science standards. Eventually, Ohio will get to the next generation science standards, unless we have to fight the evolution battle or the global climate warming battle and it gets derailed, but it's going to be in place. What those science practices do is to break apart inquiry. How many people have heard of teaching by inquiry? Of course. What does that mean? And then it's more difficult to describe that. Obviously, it has kids doing things and asking questions and gathering data and pulling things together. But what has been done with the science practices is to think about the fundamental thinking skills that need to be developed in kids. Obviously, teaching science is not memorizing the book, even though the kids would like it to be that way, because for some kids that's kind of easy. But really what it is teaching kids how to think. Then there are the math practices. And lo and behold, there just happens to be 8 math practices from the Common Core. Now, you math teachers, you've encountered the math practices because Ohio has adopted Common Core. You science teachers, you ought to be reading those math practices because lo and behold, they're the same. They're in different order, but they're the same as the science practices. And you math teachers, you ought to be reading the science practices because they're the same. And if we could just join forces and not let the kids derail this, no, I've never seen, no, we never did any graphing in math. Or the vice versa, I'm sure your science teacher has you do graphs. No, our science teacher never does anything like that. But if we could just join forces and realize that we're on the same page, we would be in much better shape. Then the very remarkable thing that was done in pulling together hundreds, thousands of scientists and engineers in all fields is what has emerged as the next generation science standards. And you can see inklings of this within the current Ohio standards. They jumped on engineering and looked deeply into engineering. And engineering research, and then there's engineering design, which is a little bit different than just doing an inquiry and trying to find out new knowledge. But lo and behold, engineers trip over new knowledge, and lots of new scientific knowledge ends up being invented, discovered in engineering laboratories. The whole thing mixes together. But then what was done was to look very specifically at these engineering practices. As you are trying to do an engineering design challenge, why are you doing that? Why are you doing engineering design challenges? And there's 8 very specific answers that you can come up with like that, because those are the engineering practices. And lo and behold, they're very parallel to the science practices. Oh, and they're parallel, but in a different order to the mathematics practices. This is where the world is. We're just a little bit behind in Ohio, but the next generation science standards, you're not doing any damage to anybody by reading those things and thinking about those things and incorporating them into your lessons, because this is really what the current Ohio standards are really trying to do anyway. This just makes the job a little bit easier for you. Okay. Now, we're going to shift over into journals and journal writing, articles, and writing of journal articles. Just take out a little corner of a piece of paper and think about your instructional praxis, your professionalism, what you do in the classroom, and maybe what you do to get ready to be in the classroom. Think about that and write down 2 things that you're very good at. And 2 things that you are good at in your professional practice. And I'm going to warn you, we're going to share some of these. Okay, now get in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 and just share some of these tentatively with your colleagues and explain what you were talking about. We're only doing this for about 3 minutes. What I'd like to do is to hear just some of the kinds of things that you are that you're good at, and obviously, if you wrote it down on a piece of paper, you're probably proud of, right? Embarrassed by this? Maybe, but we've got to get over that, particularly if you want to do a presentation or if you want to do a journal article. Because, you know, that's basically what people are doing. Somebody knows something. Somebody has insights. Somebody has been able to figure something out through practice or through formal structured research, and now they're sharing the results. They're sharing their insights. This group, what was something that somebody is good at? Okay, so all of that sounds pretty much in the ballpark. Sounds like a kind of expertise that could be shared with other teachers. Now, we don't have a lot of time, and we certainly don't have our, fifth bell carefully blocked off, no phone calls, no incoming email for manuscript preparation. It doesn't happen at the university either. But in fact, there are things that you know, there are things that you could share. You could take any one of those topics and incorporate it into a title of a presentation, and you could go off to the Council of Mathematics Teachers or to the SECO Science Education Council of Ohio and do a presentation. And those kinds of things that you're listing are the draw, are the kinds of things that other teachers would come to hear. I mean, how to be organized. What teacher would not do that? How to save 150 hours in each year that you could devote to whatever you wanted to do if you were just better organized, or any of these other kinds of topics. Okay, now I want you to kind of keep those things in mind. I'm asking you to keep now 2 things in mind. That which you've just said, and then also the other, this, I don't want to use the word standard, but it's sort of a gold standard. The thing that we are on the same page on all across the country, except for Iowa and Georgia and a few other places, the science and engineering and mathematics practices. Okay, you got to keep those kind of in mind. Okay, now what I want you to do is to look at, Julie, could you pass those out? I'd like you to look at this write-up, and what I'm going to want you to do is to, read this and characterize this. And then I'll ask you some questions about it. Okay, where did this journal article appear? Probably. Actually, I think it's the Online Inquirer, something like that. And what you're able to do is you're able to submit your own articles. And I think somebody reads them to make sure that there's no bad words in them and that it's reasonably appropriate for the community. Who probably submitted this? What school district? Probably. And why did they submit this? Yes?
Part of the deal with IBM?
Actually, IBM was amazed that Deer Park actually was able to get this kind of publicity. But they didn't require it.
Bragging rights.
Pardon?
Bragging rights.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to funding. They want good support from their community, and if they see there's an outreach program, they're going to vote.
Who do you think the audience was?
Parents.
Probably the parents. Yeah. And the person that wrote it? Actually, it was their PR person. And most school districts do have a PR person. And it wouldn't be unreasonable for you to know who that person was. And it may be somebody that had, depending on the size of your district, that has 2 or 3 other duties too. But that PR person is under the gun to get good things out there. And they are delighted to have help in doing that. Now, if you were to get something like this, okay, and this was a little project where IBM said, we've got this e-mentoring platform that we've developed over the past 10 years, and we've redeveloped it, and we'd like to get hooked up with a school district. And we said, well, we know a small district where it would be easy to kind of try this out. And Deer Park said, oh yeah, man, that'd be great for IBM. And it was amazing. I mean, there's these 30 IBM people, professionals, world travelers, who met with, 25 of them, met with 25 kids, 8th graders, and they went through and had conversations. And the thing was neatly structured. And it seemed to really have a nice impact on the kids. And the other people that were impacted by this were the IBMers, because they found out about kids and the struggle that kids have. Deer Park is kind of a, anybody here from Deer Park? No, of course not. A blue-collar district that works hard. But there was another motivation for this being out there.
Because IBM wants little people in their company?
Yes, actually, because there's 2,000 open jobs right now in IT and computer science in the Cincinnati area. They can't fill them. Companies are leaving because there's not enough kids, young people, or older people retraining. If you want to think about retraining and do something, think about computer programming. You can get a job. It'll pay more than what you're getting paid now. But there's another reason, too, for this. And it's completely altruistic. And that is, here's something that worked. It would be nice for other people to know about this. And maybe this could be replicated. Maybe this could be replicated with other companies and or in other districts. This is a journal article. And it meets all of those kinds of criteria for getting ideas out there, getting insights out there, getting some new knowledge out there for others to be able to consume. Okay, now I'm going to give you 2 articles. And you don't have to read every word of this. Kind of read the first page or so, and then, kind of look at the conclusions, figure out who wrote it. Okay. As you think about these 2 articles, which one of the 2 articles, there are 2 types of articles. Who's the audience for these articles? Science teachers, right? Could be it could be administrators of a school. If you could get them to sit down and read it, it would be kind of nice. Okay. Of those 2 articles, which one is closest to what it is that you think you could write? Probably the friendship one, right? Because this is what I have done. It has worked. And now I'm helping you, another teacher. And then, of course, it has to be a particular teacher. It's probably not going to be the biology teacher. It's probably going to be a physical science teacher or a physics teacher. But this is something that worked in my classroom, and I'm telling you how you can do it and make it work in your classroom. That's basically what it boils down to. Have you ever done anything that is worth sharing with other teachers? Those posters that you have agonized through, it's already there. And of course, each time you reteach that and make modifications to your design challenge, it just gets better, and it is therefore easier to share. What person is this written in? Does that surprise you?
No. It makes it more personal.
Sure. It makes sense. But journal writing, you could have the idea that it has to be written in highfalutin language. Hopefully there's no misspellings, and hopefully things don't end in prepositions and stuff like that. But it's conversational. It is, I am communicating this from me to you in a way that another teacher could make use of it. It doesn't have the full lesson plans there. It talks about goals and objectives without writing them down just to be picked out. Whoever it is that's consuming this still has to do a little bit of teacher work in order to make this fit for their kids. And with whatever the reader has in mind in terms of what it is that I am good at. And so somebody might say, yeah, okay, this is great, but I'm going to have to tweak this a little bit because some of the kids could sort of blow this off, but I know how to get kids excited about learning. Or I can make this fit together with other content and other topics that we have taught or will be teaching. Or I know how to put this over the top in terms of getting this all organized. I know exactly what to do. And so there's still a lot of professional work on the part of the consumer in order to make this work in the classroom. Obviously, you don't hand out the article to the kids and say, you know, why don't you just go do this? Okay, so if that article is, this is what I do, and this is what you could do, and I'm sharing this, what's the other article? How's the other article differ from that? Same audience, teachers.
Seems very research-based versus not anecdotal, but they just spend a lot of time in the literature. It's almost like a literature review.
Who wrote the first article? The friendship thing.
The teacher,
Okay, who wrote the second article?
professor.
Some of the best articles are articles that are written by a team of people that connect together. Somebody from university and somebody from teacher. Teacher's got lots of first-hand experience, knows what's going to work, what's not going to work. Somebody at the university has typically been removed from the classroom for a while, kind of forgets all of that which happens on a day-to-day basis, and is also getting paid to try to pull things together and to make sense out of all of this, because they're supposed to know all of this as opposed to working with kids day in and day out. So, but that second article, and I stumbled across this, and that second article has been bothering me for over a week because it's so good. And it's good because it sort of pins things down in terms of some criteria. And then the other thing, it's in italics under each one of the practices, the misconceptions. And you look at those things, you think about engineering design, I bet you have encountered some of these things. Like, okay, we're going to do, somebody said, I'm good at having kids do brainstorming. Man, that is great, because kids will do brainstorming and somebody will come up with an idea and somebody else will repeat it and then somebody else will repeat it and somebody else will be off the topic. And it is not easy, even for us as adults, to break out of our first wonderful thought and to invest in that and to admit that, oh, this isn't really working. I need to go back to the drawing board and to break through that. In fact, one of the kinds of things, and you might look at those misconceptions and your reaction to those misconceptions or habits of mind or mishabits of mind that kids have, and you look at them and you say, oh, how true. And you might also say, yeah, well, obviously what needs to be done is this, this, and this. You need to break through that. Come on. You're not doing your job unless you get students to break through that. Now, I apologize that this is not a math article, but it's close to a math article, particularly if you recognize that those math practices and the science practices and the engineering practices, that they're all all pretty much the same. And also, you have to let it slip away that I'm teaching kids to memorize things. Memorize the steps of the engineering design cycle. That's not the point, is it? It's to form new habits of mind, new ways of thinking about things. I think one of the things that you are absolutely positioned to do is to do the practitioner journal article. Where was that published? The Science Teacher. There's a limited set of publications. You can find state publications. You can find conferences where you can do an oral presentation rather than the written presentation. And if you do that and stay awake the night before worrying about, oh, is anybody going to show up and am I going to make a fool of myself? Once you've invested all of that, you might as well put it down on paper and send it in for publication. But you are primed for that because you're doing things that other teachers are not doing. Absolutely, you are doing things that others are not doing. And to find these kinds of articles, use just UC Library and stuck in advanced search. It's hard to find them unless you know the trick. And the trick is look for the word engineering and look in Science Teacher. And of course, once you find an article and you read the article, there's references at the end of the article, and that may lead you to other places and other ideas and other sources. There may be some MSP project someplace within the country where teachers have published things, but it's only published on that university website, and so it's difficult, but you might tease things out by looking at how things are referenced within a journal article. And for mathematics, how would you go about the search? Engineering, and you do math teacher, doesn't work. Because the mathematics teacher has published 2 articles on engineering since 1996. I couldn't believe it. And furthermore, you can't get full PDF downloads, online access to the articles. And I thought, well, let me go to NCTM. What's NCTM? And what's NSTA? And if you were an engineering teacher, what organization might you be associated with? It's not as well defined. And then there are associations of technology teachers which also have publications. And I thought, oh, well, here's a journal called Teaching Mathematics in the Middle School. I thought, oh, let me try that. Probably not going to be anything there. After all, it's middle school. Tons of great ideas. And it's almost like NCTM has made a decision. We're going to keep sort of pure mathematics in the mathematics teacher. And things, even though they may be adaptable for high school, we'll publish it in the middle school teacher professional journal. And they got lots of examples. Pass that out. Yeah. Yeah, I'll do this side. And so here's a mathematics article, and lo and behold, it's not all that different from the science article.
Thank you.
Sorry. And you sort of look at this article, you say, hey, these folks who are the people that wrote this article? This is kind of the combination between teachers and university people. But you get the impression that these mathematics teachers in engineering are on the same page as the science teachers in engineering. Wouldn't it be great if there was a collaboration between a science teacher and a math teacher and producing an article that gets published in both places? Okay, now I need to ask you a question. What time is it? We finish at what? 11:30, right? Yeah. That very first article that was about Deer Park and the IBM and the mentoring. Could you write it something like that for what it is that you do? You could. You really could. And the things that you're doing around these engineering design challenges are noteworthy and are worth putting out there. And if you can get it out there and it's set as a link, you can make use of that in some little something or other that you send home to parents or whomever. If you were to get something like that published in the online Inquirer, and your principal found out about it, what would be his or her reaction to that?
Checking off a category that we now get evaluated on. Community involvement, parent involvement.
Would it be upset? Would she be upset? It could all be very embarrassing. What about the superintendent of schools as they found out about this article? Because you just happened to send the superintendent of schools an email that says, oh, I thought you might be interested. What would the superintendent's reaction be? It'd be okay, wouldn't it? What if the school board got hold of it? Accidentally. Actually, the principal or the superintendent would make sure that the school board saw the little article. And it helps to make those kinds of arguments. And the more that this can be out there, that you look like you know what you're doing, and can create that impression, it also is a possibility of making connections with business and industry. I mean, any of your design challenges have some kind of a connection with business and industry. And you could have people coming in from business and industry to help out. Now, sometimes they're not a lot of help because they don't understand and they're surprised and they're shocked and but they can be massaged. And there's lots of people out there. I mean, they're regular United States citizens and they've got kids in school and they've got the same trials and tribulations that you have. And some you don't want to associate with. Others, you would love to have them as your friend or colleague. And to be able to make those kinds of connections would be really great. This summer we were doing a little project, And it happened in a roundabout way. And it was some middle-level manager at P&G. His son is going to Rice University. The kid comes back from winter break, Christmas break, and is talking about this project that he's involved with. And it is something called STEAM tracks. And it's elementary grades, but it is an engineering design curriculum. And it is to present an engineering design challenge to kids. Do you know EIE, engineering is elementary? If you run across that out of the Boston Museum of Science. It's for elementary, but you could adapt a bunch of those things to high school. So it's similar to EIE. But what they have done is to work into this curriculum, the kids design blades for a windmill, or they design a windmill and they're trying to make the windmill more efficient as measured by, they got a little generator on there, a motor operating backwards, which is producing several millivolts of electricity. And they can now redesign the blades and print them out on a 3D printer. And the 3D printers are, oh God, they're like held in awe. I mean, I think a lot of people, they think of these 3D printers and they're thinking, oh, it's just like Star Trek. I could just walk up to it and order Earl Grey tea and it'll just be there. I don't know why it's so over the top, but it is. And so we had a little pilot project here over the summer where the kids are designing their windmills and making new windmill blades and printing them out on the 3D printer, which takes forever to print stuff out. And then invited somebody from business and industry who makes use of 3D printers, Norton Medical up in Dayton, and this is what we do. These are the things that we print out, prototypes for medical devices or for artificial knees, and just sharing this with some very explicit directions. Actually, it was sort of interesting. You're going to do a kind of a little presentation with the kids. He says, okay, here's my deck. You know what a deck is? It's business talk for my PowerPoint. Here's my deck. 39 slides. 12.5. No, come on. These are sixth graders. Okay. 19 slides. Oh, gosh. But then, after meeting the kids, an email that says, you know, I think it would be better if you sat down at a table with these kids as a small group. And it would be really good, I mean, if you want to do a PowerPoint, have pictures only. Then you could adapt it, and you could talk about what you want to talk about. And, I mean, these people are smart. They've got their own kids. They know how to talk to kids if they are in a conversation with kids, rather than doing some highfalutin presentation. And why don't you bring along some stuff? Oh man, he brought along stuff. And of course, the kids were fascinated. The curious thing was, there was some 3 retired P&G people that wanted to replicate this in the Finneytown, Winton Woods area later on this summer. They were fascinated. And they just sat down there next to these 5th graders, and the kids asked questions. The retired P&G engineers ask questions. When this is being replicated again, we already have 6 current P&G engineers that want to sit in on the 5th and 6th grade presentation. You can make these kinds of things happen, but you have to massage your community in order to make it happen. And part of that is getting out there and letting other people know what it is that you're doing. All right. This one, just one for every 2 people.
Okay, got it. You guys have to share.
You got to share on this one.
Do you ever find anything like the high school math level? Were you successful in finding anything?
I think they've just made a decision
Not to bother.
to just,
Right, I was
the
just
title
curious.
of the journal, we know it's wrong. We're
Right.
just going to put
Right.
all of that stuff, that
the
kind
middle
of stuff there in
Right.
the middle school journal.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'm just curious. Yeah.
I know. I thought, God, this is weird.
This is neat, you know.
Okay, you've read enough of that. What do you think of that article?
I'm not going to choose that one to read.
Really long and really tiny.
Okay, so this would be a journal article. And Anand was scaring me when he was talking to you that you've got to have data and you're not going to get things published unless you have that data. Setting it up precisely for this type of a journal article. Probably this is not the kind of a journal article that you want to write. You probably aren't motivated to do that unless, and here's a possibility, unless you're in a master's degree program and you need to pull together a thesis or you need to pull together a project. And it would be a great way to overlap some effort. Or maybe you might be intrigued by this. And last night it dawned on me something. If you go back to the article, this article, and you look at the misconceptions, remember they could be misconceptions very similar to mathematics misconceptions or mishabits of mind. And if you look at any one of those misconceptions, beginning designers tend to treat design challenges as well-defined problems and immediately solve them with the first single correct answer that comes to mind. If that's a problem, and if you think that you've got some insight into how to overcome that problem or any of the other problems, and if you were able to do something in your classroom like action research. Have you ever heard of action research? It's, and sometimes learning communities and are tied in with action research, where there's a group of teachers, a small group of teachers, that Japanese lesson design, heard of that? Basically, it's, okay, we're going to put our heads together. We're both teaching biology, or we're both teaching Algebra 1. And we're going to see if we can improve our instruction, see if we can improve the lessons that we teach. And we're going to put our heads together, design a good lesson, and we're going to teach it and see what happens. And then, because as teachers, you know if things are working or not, whether or not you want to believe it, but you know in your heart of hearts whether or not it worked. Then you go back, redesign the lesson, and try it again. What if you were to focus on any one of these misconceptions, which are right there in print, that you can reference, that it is well known that students, and make reference to that particular article, that students have trouble disassociating from their one first and only good idea or not so good idea, but you know how to deal with that. You know how to attack that. You know how to do brainstorming in a different way. You know how to get people to sort through ideas. And that could become a research project. And it might even be fun. And there are guidelines for action research that you can do, and you don't have to get permission to do. Yep.
I have a question. Maybe better answered by Julie, and maybe it already has been answered over the past couple of years. But is there anybody, Julie, that's a research-based article on this program, like somebody from the university, like a beginning, middle, and then kind of end study or something?
I mean, we have started doing some of that kind of stuff on this program. Are you talking about a teacher or faculty? Because I got some.
A faculty member.
Yeah, faculty, yes. We also have, like, for example, I don't know if any of you ran into Doug Worley last year, who was with our program for 1 year, and then he got moved to a lower grade level. But he did finish the master's associated with this project. And like Ted said, he did his action research on a project he did with his students, so it was for his master's degree. He did a paper on a project he did with his students, so that kind of fit perfectly, kind of just what Ted was mentioning, fit well with his master's degree.
There is fairly sophisticated evaluation process, and you've been filling out forms and giving feedback and your attitudes and stuff like that.
We're going to try to do an article about, how your students do the engineering design process, loop as part of their surveys. We want to do an article just about how we developed that instrument and some of the results from that instrument. That's just one example.
And then there's some research that's going on around, and we've tried to be very careful not to get kids involved in the research. I'll tell you why in a minute. Around the concepts and the way you all put together the information and organize the information, some concept mapping that some of you have been asked to be involved in. One of the problems, and I'll say it's a problem, at the university is that over time, at universities and medical complexes, and people have been unscrupulous in doing experiments on people. And, well, let's just, they're all on death row. We'll just give them shots of syphilis and see how long it takes them to die.
Or Facebook just recently.
There you go. That probably had IRB, institutional
Review or research board. No.
You always just say IRB.
I thought it was
Review board, institutional review board. Because that was connected with some universities, and they had to go through hoops, and you can be sure that people are checking to see whether or not there was a no harm situation. Yes, people were looked at, but were people being manipulated? If people were being manipulated, given certain kinds of advertisements as opposed to other kinds of advertisements, somebody was in trouble. But at the university, we have to go through, you as a student at the university doing a master's project, you'd have to go through IRB approval. And basically, it's whatever you can think of that could go wrong in a medical research study. Well, we'll just give some people effective drugs, and others will just see if they wither away. And, at what point do you stop the intervention? With kids in school, it's much less of risk, but we still have to go through and be able to show no harm. And you had to sign off on, early on, if you remember, you were consented. Do you want to participate in this research? And if you said no, then that was the answer. No, I'm not going to do it. Probably doesn't make any difference in terms of how you were instructed. And we can still collect evaluation data. And you as a teacher absolutely can collect data in your classrooms. You can give attitude surveys. You can do things to find out how effective you are in your instruction, because that's what you do on a daily basis. You're constantly trying to make your instruction better. And so in instruction as a classroom teacher, you're exempt from all of that. But your school district and CPS does have permission to engage in research. And it is, it's a difficult thing to kind of get through. But action research is something that you could do. Now, if you're connected up with a university person, the university person is going to have to pay attention, because there is that review board. Enough said. What I would like you to do is go to UC libraries and see if you can find some articles. I told you how to do this. Go to uc.edu, click on the Libraries tab. Usually they're going to be a little bit more general than that. The mathematics practices are likely to be there because everybody's jumping on the Common Core, and the practices, of course, are at all grade levels. And then there will be the content. I mean, if it's middle school, it may be pre-algebra or algebra 1 versus geometry, and so you might have to adjust that way. But what I'm seeing is that these are more generic approaches that could fit into a variety of subjects, even though the teacher may be describing it. And so you'd have to tweak it. But at least there's an idea there. Or what you can do as you look at these different articles is that you say, I'm not finding any article on what I'm interested in. Perfect, because that would be something that you could write about. Okay, I want to share a couple of things with you, and then I want you to do something. One of these things, and if in that really tiny print research article, you may have noticed that there were little parentheses in the text and some dates after them, references to some other works. In those research articles, if you count the number of those little references per paragraph, you run out of fingers sometimes. However, even in the practitioner journal articles, you're going to see references. And if you go to the end of the article, you're going to find out what that means. That's the most annoying part of writing an article. Julie will help you with that. Is that okay?
Yes, that is.
And what we have thought about is, there are probably some sort of standard things that probably need to be referenced. Like in this one, I thought I saw it someplace. Oh, National Science Education Standards and National Resource Council, 1996. But there's not a lot of these things. But what we could do would be to try to find some of these key publications that probably should be referenced. You also notice that there are sentences in some of these articles. You say, why the heck would anybody bother to say that? Laboratory activities have an important place in the science classroom. Kind of like, okay. Or the context for the studying of mathematics is important in the classroom. And you kind of have to lock in to some of these universal truths as one is, and then you head off in your own direction. And you also notice that a lot of these articles, other than the research article, they've got some little diagrams, they've got some pictures, and that might also be something that we could help you out with. If you're writing an article for the science teacher, you need to search to find out the precise format that they need for publication, or the mathematics teacher, or teaching mathematics in middle school, and they'll have a very specific format that you have to follow. But you just find out what that is, and you just do it. And it may be references are in somewhat different form than maybe the last time you wrote a paper, and so you just have to modify the way you look at things and do it the way they want you to do it. I'm going to show you one other thing, and this is something which is a fantastic resource that nobody knows about. Do you know about this?
Yeah, you showed it.
NSDL, okay, right. And nsdl.org, and then go to the science literacy maps. And there are lots of areas that you could go to. But one thing that you really should look at is the nature of technology. And then go to design constraints or design systems. And even though you don't have guidelines from the state of Ohio for science or for mathematics, and this is for science and mathematics, this website. There is some agreement that for grades 6 through 8, this is the take-home stuff. This is what kids ought to be thinking about. As a result of going through an engineering design challenge, the kids come away saying to themselves as they get on the bus after school, boy, design really needs to take into account not only the physical and biological constraints, but economic constraints also. I just can't wait to share this evening with my family. But the curious thing is that when you get down to grades 3 through 5, and you're teaching grade 8 or grade 9, things like factors such as cost, safety, appearance, environmental impact, and what will happen if the solution fails must be considered in technological design. That's going to be news for 10th graders. And so there are lots of goals to attack and to address on these maps. And remember that don't your design activities tap into some of these different things? Even if you didn't look at these things when you were putting them together, you can probably go back and think about your activity and say, choice of materials, yeah, I'm doing that. And remember that if you click on these things, you get links to resources. Yep.
So one of the units that I have is that I would consider writing about is one that I'm going to be redoing this school year.
Uh-huh.
And it's my revision unit. So what are steps that we should take in thinking about like data to collect or in addition to CEEMS, or what do we need to do to document this well? I mean, I see like pictures and diagrams and what should we be planning for if we're thinking about?
That's a good question. And what I would like you to do, and it's all her fault, I would like you to open up PowerPoint. And I would like you to make 5 slides that outline what it is you think needs to be in this. Think of it as a presentation. And 5 slides that somehow get to the essence of what that presentation is. And I want you to kind of think about this, and then we'll talk about it. And you'll come away with an answer, but I think you already know the answer. So you work individually, or if you want to team up with somebody, that's okay. And put together a PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint you might actually use if you were going to do a presentation around your topic. Of course, the first thing you got to do is decide what would be your topic. Probably it's going to be close to something you've been working on, like a project or a revision. And it might be, this is how to do this thing, this particular engineering design challenge, or the topic might be how to get the kids over the hump of being frustrated when their designs fail. But you know more about that than anybody else. So for the next 20 minutes, I'd like you to put together this 5-slide outline, and then we'll talk about it.
So these aren't 5 different points that need to be in there.
5 different things that need to be in. I think you could think of this as you're going to do a presentation for the Ohio Council of Mathematics. And so you're going to show them 5 slides that are going to be, in essence, your talking points.
Like if you were doing an oral presentation.
As if you were doing an oral presentation. Yeah. Okay? I understand.
One aspect, not all of the aspects. You want to know one aspect, like of just the redesign part?
That's your choice.
Or you wanted to
Or it could be the, here's how I do this whole engineering design thing. That's your choice. Is anybody paying attention to me? Okay. So, as you started through this, how many slides did you produce?
7.
What kinds of problems did you run into? Oh, come on. You certainly ran into problems.
I couldn't get all 5 slides done at that time.
Yeah, because it sort of snowballs, and it's kind of like, oh man, we got a lot to think about here. Yeah, and so I think, I mean, this is a design process in trying to put together a presentation or a lesson plan or an article, and it kind of works nicely if you can do it through iterations and at least get it started. A job started is a job half done, and then come back to it and think about it and elaborate on it. Okay, what other things did you run into, Felicia?
Think about what we could use for like to measure student engagement when we were looking at so we would need help in doing that in order to present that the kids were more engaged.
Okay. If you are writing a practitioner article, you don't have to worry too much about data. That what you can do in your expert opinion, it is clear that the students are more engaged. And, you know, even if you were to put together some simple questionnaire like, you know, I agree or disagree, I love coming to my science class or my math class, and
Well, actually,
just
we have surveys that actually, there are a few, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
there are
and that's
a few,
fine.
Questions specifically on that point, so we could have Kevin Mulvey pull out the data from that particular unit for your students and look at that, those very things.
and as long as you are doing this
Which they-
as a teacher and you're writing this article, then you're going to be okay in terms of IRB approval, unless you think your district is going to get upset because you're doing research on the kids. You're not. You're doing what you need to know in order to do a better job at your profession. What other kinds of quandaries did you get into, or questions that came up, or you know, it sure would have been nicer if he had told us this, that, or the other thing. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the way to go about answering that question is to go ahead and do some searches and see what's out there, and pay attention to when these different articles were published, and but then also overlap with these things. Things that for sure are unique. When I asked you, what is it that you're good at? You can take something which is, oh yeah, one more engineering design lesson being shared, but the topic is going to be a little bit different. It's going to line up with some science or math content a little bit differently, and in fact, it's going to be hard to find something exactly like what it is that you might be thinking of. But then you can also then put your personal, professional twist on things to make it unique. And you know, you read an article on, you know, friendship thing, you know, and in that article, he, I think, was also talking about why this works out well with students. You know, it was how to get students motivated in things. But there were several things that you said that you were good at, that you can use that as an additional rationale, additional hook, which makes things unique. And the other thing is you try these things out, and you can get feedback from people. They'll say, yeah, this is okay, but couldn't you do a little bit more with? Say, okay, now I know what I'm doing. And On the other hand, you can go to, you can go to lots of conferences. You say, for crying out loud, I could have done that presentation. Nobody else is worrying about this. You don't have to worry about it. And, but as you pull together 2 or 3 different ideas, what it is that I know is the magic elixir of teaching and instruction, and design challenge, and some particular content. I heard people talking about the difficulty that students have in learning some particular type of content. If you know that, other teachers know that. If you think you've got an answer on how to deal with that, you got something to share. Yeah, I think that this is definitely an area of interest. It's one thing to do an engineering challenge. Have you ever seen the egg drop challenge? Yeah, all the time. Does anybody learn anything from the egg drop challenge? But that thing needs to be, if you're going to do the egg drop, it ought to be connected to something or other. But you almost have to go through and do it and see that it's somewhat vacuous. Yeah, the kids were kind of interested and motivated, but I'm disappointed. What is it that I need to do in order to make that thing really rock? For areas, now I'm answering your question. Areas in just kind of looking at articles, I think there are about 5 things to pay attention to. The purpose, and it's just to give the reader or whoever is listening to your presentation a quick idea of what's going on here. And then the approach, what it is that you're doing. Strengths and pitfalls. I think that that's a way to capture, yet this has an impact. That would be a strength. As a result of doing this, the kids learn something or develop skills or are more motivated. And the downside, I think that it's really worth calling that out. And if you're writing for other teachers, it's going to give you a heck of a lot more credibility if you recognize that everything is not all wonderful and golden, and that there are things which you got to watch out for. And then a conclusion. And that's 4. And the 5th is, I think you need pictures and diagrams. And so then that's a 5th area of something to pay attention to. Julie had an idea as you were working on these things. Why don't you email, no matter what the state of your thing is, your PowerPoint to her, and then she will know what's in your heads. And she can pay attention to, there's a conference coming up in only 6 months, and can help you get on the program. And then the other thing that we could do is we can do some of that literature review. You're going to have to anchor this. You're going to have to cite something to show that you're paying attention to what else is going on out there in the world. And that would also then, knowing the topics that you're thinking about, to help pull together some of those references and citations that you could use. Okay, we're out of time. I do have these things on action research if anybody's interested in that.